Hi everyone, this is Chris, and this is the inaugural solo recording from the Botch pit. So, there were a lot of options as to where to begin with, really, as far as what we wanted to update first and post first from what we've been doing. We have a number of transcripts already done. We've got a number of transcripts we've been writing. But, figuring that we've had newer players actually requesting since we started doing this, we've had players messaging us, actually calling us, texting, whatever, that are very curious as to how to get into the Chronicles of Darkness setting, where to begin. And it can be very convoluted, especially when you add it to the background that a lot of these players are like, they're still assuming it's World of Darkness, and they don't understand the whole difference between New World of Darkness, Classic World of Darkness. You just get a lot of that from newer people, storytellers, players, what have you. So I figured the most practical way to begin with would be the easing into it and entry-level guide to the Chronicles of Darkness transcript that we posted around a week ago. It makes a lot of sense as far as what people are looking for, what people want to know, and in general, if we're going to do a first recording, it makes sense to start from start. So, just a little bit of clarification. As of this point, you have the Chronicles of Darkness setting, and you have the World of Darkness, or One World of Darkness, you may call it, setting, which is the traditional. The now World of Darkness has reverted back to what it was initially, where you'll have Vampire the Masquerade, Werewolf the Apocalypse, Mage the Ascension. Those are the big boys, and then going down. And Chronicles of Darkness is now fully licensed over to Onyx Path, and it is its own separate thing. Now, I really appreciate this. There are a lot of ways these things could have gone. White Wolf proper could have very easily has seen it as, even though they're getting paid off and licensed, they could have seen it as competition and just decided not to move forward. So I'm very excited that everybody handled this appropriately and we get both lines respectively, because I know as far as I go in my roleplay experience in the setting is I quite enjoy both. Now, the reason that at the moment we're really deep into Chronicles of Darkness is I tend to run what we've now affectionately, we're calling them zoo games, which is, this is also up for debate whether or not it's a good idea or not. You're not forced to play either just mortals or one specific supernatural. I kind of open up the floodgates and allow you that within reason to kind of pick and choose out of the Chronicles of Darkness setting what creatures you want to play, because I'm a bit versed in all of the systems. Again, I'm not fully thorough with all of them, but that's obviously with the projects we have going on, that is something that I'm adapting to. And it's just interesting, especially when you have people coming in. You don't want to be like, oh, cool, yeah, this setting has, these 9 different core types of beings you can play as, but you're playing a vampire. Or you're playing a werewolf. And again, I'm not playing preferences here. But it's tricky. So we opened it up as a zoo campaign. But then you also have the situation now where people are like, alright, where do I start in with this game in general? Yeah, it's a zoo game. That means the doors are open for whatever. So consider this the beginner's guide to storytelling and just pretty much how to run a world full of all these different creatures, and what's the easiest for people to get into when they're beginning, or to even tell the story for, really, if you want to get down to it. So, as you've noticed, if you read the transcript, this does not follow word for word the transcript. It's more of a guideline. So, I mean, let's be honest, if we were following a transcript word for word, it would be a much shorter recording. With that said, we're going to go in the order of how they were released, and then we're going to give it a kind of a loose 1 to 10 rating. And then at the end, I'm going to list them in order as to what I think is the easiest for storytellers and players to get into in the Chronicles of Darkness setting. So, once again, thank you for even choosing to listen to us. We really appreciate it. We know there's a lot of stuff going on out there, and you're taking your time to hear us out. It's really cool. That said, we're going to start right up. The first release, Chronicles of Darkness. Now it's on its 2nd edition. So, as far as the setting, so when they made the New World of Darkness back 2004, they wanted to make it where it was, I don't want to say, I'm afraid to say any dreaded words, I don't know how I'll get struck down. They made one core rule book that you could kind of use almost like its own supernatural setting if you wanted to. You could do a lot with it. It's pretty open, but it didn't have a lot of structure because it was just, hey, here's rules, open world, go nuts. But you needed that core rulebook to play as any of the other creatures. They didn't have the full character creation. It would be like use your template and then add this to it. So with its second edition, it's vastly improved. And when I say second edition, I don't mean originally the second edition was just called World of Darkness Second Edition. It has been redubbed Chronicles of Darkness, the core rulebook, and it includes the God Machine Chronicle, which was published on its own separately. And it's a monster. It's a really good book. I really like it. It's very large. You definitely you can pretty much only get it on print on demand. And even if you don't spring for the extra money, which I'll be honest, I haven't yet. I kind of cheaped out when I first got back in. So I have it. But I'm still, still very pleased with it overall. At least definitely with the content. It has that full campaign setting, all the rules for creating stuff. And what was really cool is the God Machine campaign that's inside of it set the tone for stuff that would come later on, such as Demon the Descent, which we'll get to. So, while it has the basic rules of gameplay and whatnot, it's still, now with the second edition books, such as Mage, The Awakening second edition, and all of those, they actually have the basics for creating your mortals now. They kind of went back to the way the classic World of Darkness books did it, where you had everything you need in that book now. And almost all of the books are on their second edition. I need to clarify that. So it's just kind of a disclaimer. So the first core rule, the core rulebook's good. Has a bunch of story seeds, but really it has also the biggest selection of merits and just background on building the characters. It's you could just run a game using this if you so chose to. It would not be difficult. Think X-Files, even think Supernatural, any sort of stuff like that. And again, I will use these references later. But when you add in the God Machine Chronicle, it gets a little bit more out there even. So, that said, what it's like is like the X-Files, Fringe, and a lot of works with the early Stephen King stuff, which is cool. User-friendly, 7 out of 10. Yeah, it's more systems than anything else, but it's still the framework of the setting. I'm not going to say you need it 100% anymore if you're playing the second edition games, but as the storyteller, I extremely recommend it. So the second release was Vampire the Requiem, obviously a total reimagining from Vampire the Masquerade, which is now on its second edition. So it's freaking Vampire. You don't get much more user-friendly than Vampire. Almost everybody who roleplays in general, they've heard of Vampire the Masquerade. People have played Vampire Bloodlines. You have an idea of what you're in for. It's nothing that surprising. And as far as the systems go, I think they knew that was where a lot of people were going to be jumping off. So they kept it pretty basic. And I mean, with the first setting, you had five clans, 5 paths of what you could choose to go as, like almost religiously, if you will. You had a lot of that sort of stuff. So, again, it's very user-friendly. Until you start getting into the blood magic or whatnot. Or the, what is it? That's off my head. I forget off the top of my head. Thorak, possibly. But there's a whole bunch of different stuff. It can kind of be as complicated as you want it to. But really, just breaking in, it is definitely very user-friendly. So what can I compare it to? It's kind of like Kindred the Embraced from the 90s. You will catch me referencing that again. Where it was very... Yeah, it's horror, and you've got the Beast, which is this inner monster. You gotta remember, man, you're no longer human, despite the fact you may look like one. But you still have a lot of the echoes of being human. And this is very much so based in politics. It's a very romantic game, as weird as it is for me to use that as a descriptor. So it's all like Kindred the Embraced, The Lost Boys, House of Cards, even, is a good reference. So out of user-friendly rating, I give this one an 8 out of 10. The setting and the systems are easily the most basic of the Chronicles of Darkness. That's not a bad thing. That does not, again, mean that it's, super basic. It is just the most clear and probably the one most players will have an easy time understanding. So from there, we go on to Werewolf the Forsaken, which is also now on its second edition, which is, again, a reimagining, if you will, of Werewolf the Apocalypse with the classic World of Darkness. However, now, instead of being, Weaver, Wild, and Worm, which you had in the original Classic Darkness, kind of forces of nature that got all messed up, that's a whole other thing. This is, you're almost like police of nature in the spirit world, which can bleed into ours. You can have creatures that have something like spirit shards, where they'll be part spider creature or part jackal creature or millipede centipede, any sort of nasty thing they could kind of be fused with from the world of what's called spirit. And your job, tasked from Father Wolf, if you will, is to go and, stop that shit in its tracks. So that doesn't fly here. You guys police that. Of course, unless you're playing as the other group, which is called the Pure Ones, which, again, I'm avoiding getting too deep into the lore of these games at the moment. It's more a matter of where does it stand getting into it. And what it's like as far as books, media, it's kind of like The Howling or Silver Bullet, but this is going to sound weird, but instead of just being mindless beasts, you're, for the most part, as far as things go, you're in control. You're not mindless, drooling monsters 99% of the time. So it's really hard to compare it to anything like that. You're a werewolf, and you're just beating the hell out of the bad shit that comes through. As far as user-friendly goes, I give it a 6 out of 10. While it's not overly complicated, a lot of players will have problems understanding the philosophical points of playing these creatures, and on top of that, some of the way the fetishes and the rites work, they can get a little dicey. They get a little out there. Not anything beyond the realm of comprehension, but again, a good chunk harder to really fully get into than Vampire. So, Mage: The Awakening, now on its 2nd edition. I'm trying to avoid playing favorites here. I'm a big fan of Mage. It is the reimagining of Mage: The Ascension from Classic World of Darkness. Now, reality as we perceive it here is kind of crap. Originally, mortals were able to work miracles of magic from this other realm, if you will, called the Realm Supernal. People got too arrogant, shit went down, and a divider went up between the worlds where now mortals could no longer normally pull that magic force through that realm. They could not work their wills upon the earth anymore. And then slowly but surely, certain people found these ways through dreams and visions and whatnot to pull that magic down through these things called watchtowers. And that defines what sort of mage you are. And now you can work your wills, miracles and whatnot. But there's still a bit of that disbelief in every human's heart that isn't awake to this. They're called sleepers. And if they see you doing things that defy reality, or if reality itself is just blatantly disrespected, you get slapped back. So the cool thing about Mage is, you could do, even at your lower levels, you could do tons of really, really powerful things. But on the other hand, you get slapped really hard when you screw it up. In fact, your power trait, if you will, is called hubris. Yeah, you can figure out what that means. So you have 2 types of ways you can cast, off the top of my head and in basic. You have something called rotes, which are spells and magics that you've practiced crap tons of times, and now instead of being a different sort of system, it's very basic. You got 2 to 3 stats you use to roll it, spend your mana, get your effect. Your risks are lowered because it's so ingrained in your mind, it's just second nature. And then you have improvised magic. I think they may have used the creative dramaturgy, potentially. And that is a whole other level. You use your knowledge of the arcana, which are your stats for the type of magic you know, and you mix that with something called your gnosis, which is your ability to pull and work your will down through those towers. And it really turns into the game of bullshitting the storyteller to see if they'll buy it. Pretty much, how are you gonna be able to explain fireballs flying down the street at noon without getting something called paradox, which is the effects that slap you back in the face from reality? How is a manhole cover just randomly going to explode under someone's feet and drop down and land on that same person's head? Now, you've got to be able to be like, well, okay, so listen, what if the news articles said that there was gas in the sewers and that manhole covers had been exploding? I mean, it's possibly true that this could have happened, and he just had bad luck and got wrecked. That's in the news all the time. Look at NASCAR, where people get hit by the tires at the races. And if your storyteller squints their eyes and, takes a minute, it's like, okay, then maybe you're not going to get, brutalized by some sort of paradox punishment. Normally you will, and that's the way it should be. It's kind of like Aladdin, infinite power, a little squishy package. So that's kind of the setting of it. What it's like Hellblazer, It's like the books of magic, Lord of Illusions, if you will. It's just, I guess you could even say some Clive Barker stuff, but I'm a huge friggin' fan. But as far as user friendly goes, we're talking 3 out of 10. Because as far as being an entry level game, I mean, if you're just sticking to the rotes, it's not as bad. I mean, we'll say if you stick to the rotes, it's probably 5 or 6 out of 10. But if you start doing your own magic, which is highly encouraged, and you can actually take those and turn those into rotes if you've done them enough times. But as far as entry level stuff goes, it's not forgiving. So again, that's 3 out of 10. From there, we go on to Promethean. You've seen Frankenstein, right? You've heard the story about from the Hebrew faith with golems, correct? Yeah, all that sort of stuff. Prometheus took the fire of creation, boom, and long story short, these things are created through different means. And they live, but they weren't born. They were never human, and they're just desperate to be human. It's so funny because so many games are spent trying to get away from basic humanity or basic mortality or hating mortality. And these guys are like, that's all we want, man. We just want to get to that's the end of our journey. That's what we want. But it's not easy to play these guys. And that's not even just statistically. If these guys stay for anywhere more than a certain amount of time, I believe they cause the effect, if I remember off the top of my head, the term is disquiet. And you know the whole pitchforks and torches thing? Yeah, they cause that wherever they are for more than a certain amount of time. It corrupts the land, it corrupts animals, people. They won't even know why they're picking up that baseball bat with spikes. They don't even know, but they're just like, hey man, I really don't like that guy. And then they all march on you, and you gotta get the hell out of there. And even worse thing is, part of your steps of becoming immortal, because you can. This is one of the few games where it is, yes, you can achieve that end goal. With Mage, you may not fully, get to the supernal realm. Vampires may never, that's for Vampire the Masquerade. I'm not even sure if they have Golconda. Werewolves just exist to police stuff. A lot of these games, they just have these payoffs that may or may not ever truly exist. But with Promethean, it's there. But part of the curse is you need to make another Promethean before you can get there, which is really a bummer. So, again, it's not the systems that are really as hard. Again, I'm giving for as far as what it's like is anything Frankenstein, and as weird as it puts, even Pinocchio. Pinocchio is a really abstract but a perfect example at the same time. He just wants to be a real boy, and he goes through hell to become one, and he meets others like him that are abused, and he goes through hell until it gets achieved. But then again, I'm going by the Disney version of Pinocchio. I have not read the actual story. Probably ends way friggin' darker than that. I just can't confirm or deny it. But as far as being an entry-level game, 5 out of 10. And it's not a stat thing. It's just difficult to play them in a game correctly. And as far as at least first edition, which is what I was really into at the time, now it's on its second edition, it's almost better suited for a one-on-one game. And if you're running a zoo game, they're almost better as an antagonist, depending on your situation. But again, that's opinion, completely my opinion. Moving on. We go to Changeling the Lost, which came after that. Now, that is a reimagining, again, from the classic World of Darkness of Changeling the Dreaming. Full disclosure, was not a fan of Changeling the Dreaming. I didn't feel like it fit in the World of Darkness. I get what it was trying to do, how bleak it was, that this last imagining of hope and whatnot was fading away day by day, and the banals of reality were taking it down. It just didn't do anything for me. I think when I was younger, I was a little kid, I played a lot of Dungeons & Dragons, and I felt like that was just a World of Darkness version of Dungeons & Dragons. Again, that's not true, but it was just, the eye of the beholder type thing. But this version, Changeling the Lost, way cooler as far as I'm concerned. There was something about you that attracted the attention of these things called the True Fae. And they are these alien... You just can't process how they think. You can't process how they exist. But they come from this realm called Fairy. And it's separated between our world with something called the Hedge. And something about you got their attention, and they were like, you know what? I want this. And they found a way to lure you in or drag you in through the Hedge. And as you went in, you got scraped by the thorns of the hedge. And it wasn't just, you got scraped, torn, ripped. But the thing is, it's not just physiological pain or damage. It dug into your psyche and your very fabric of being. You didn't go through the hedge unchanged. So they took you over there. And what they do is maybe they make you, I forget who it was that used this example. It might have been the General Gamer. Maybe they're making you dance for what feels like thousands of years. Maybe they just like the way your bone structure look, and they make you a fucking table and put you in the corner. Like, here you go, have fun. Maybe they turn you into a chandelier, or maybe you fight for their amusement. Maybe you're a concubine. Maybe you're a waiter. It could be any number of things that these people do. But whatever it was about you that they liked, they have you do it. And then something happens. And maybe it's on purpose as far as you know, but you get out. Maybe someone helps you out, but you escape. You dash through the hedge. You make a mad dash for you're like, freedom, sanity. I got to get the hell out of here. And you may have been in this place for what feels like minutes, seconds, hours, days, years, decades. It doesn't matter. And you bust through the other side and you're back. You're back among the normal populace. You're not normal anymore. And the two other real bitches about the thing is, maybe, again, time moves different there. So maybe you were gone a day as far as you were aware, but maybe it's been 15 years in real world time. Maybe it's the opposite. Maybe like you feel like you were there for hundreds of years, you get back all emotionally damaged and beat up, and it's only been, maybe you just got pulled in. Maybe you almost see your arm disappear through the hedge as you're popping out the other side. You don't know. And on top of that, the second thing that's really mean is the Fae, for some reason, they just don't want the fact that you're missing to be noticed. Which again is itself kind of curious. Like, why would they give a shit? But they do. And they make something called a fetch. And they take this thing that could be, puppy dog's tails, snails, that whole rhyme. It could be honeycombs and pubic hair. It could be, dog shit and twine. It doesn't matter. But they take it and they bind it up and they wrap it up and they put it in your place. And it looks like you. And it acts like you. Maybe it's a little different. Like, man, he seemed a little more talkative before. Or, he didn't seem as aggressive. But what if it's worse? What if you were a shit and a bully? And that's why they took you. Maybe it's like, oh man, I'm going to have him bully my hounds and turn them into better things. It took you there. And you were a shithead. And you come back and they think that, wow, something happened today where, Ryan's, I don't know what happened with Ryan. He just outgrew his nastiness. He's the best kid ever now. So now, maybe it's been 20 years that you've been gone, and you're still more than likely a shithead, and you come back out, and you see yourself as, this 13-year-old kid. But before, where you were failing and getting into fights with kids, now you're a straight-A student, and you're in the chess club. What do? Do you try to take your place back? There's so many, how are you going to do that? They're never going to believe you. Oh, Mom, Dad, I got pulled into the bushes. I've been there about 15 years. Oh, it looks like it's been 3 minutes here? Weird. That's weird. But yeah, look, here, I've got the same mole. What do you do? So now you have to make a new place for yourself. You need to take control of your life. But here's the thing. You got out. They probably didn't like that. Who's coming to take you back? Is that the huntsman calling? You don't know. But this is all the stuff you're dealing with. That's Changeling the Lost. And of course, you want to band with others like yourself for safety, for planning, for hiding, any number of reasons. But that's Changeling the Lost. And what it's like it's like Pan's Labyrinth. Labyrinth itself, which is one of my favorite movies of all time, without a doubt in my mind. Like, why did Jareth actually take that kid for Jennifer Connelly? Like, yeah, okay, he says one thing. It could be a whole other thing. Books of Magic, the Books of Fairy, which is, again, from the Books of Magic series. Changeling and... I'll say that for a whole other time, but the watchtowers from Mage tie very neatly into a lot of these different games. But Books of Magic, the Books of Fairy is a very good example of how abstract these things think and what their world is like. As far as user-friendly goes, though, I'm going to give it another 5 out of 10 because it's just not very clear how the weird works, which is one of their power stats. Because you need to make literal contracts with people. That's a source of your power, is being like, hey, if I do this for you, I promise I'll come and mow your yard 3 times a week for the next 2 years. Like, all sorts of weird stuff. And the goal is to catch them up so that they do screw up. And you get more benefits from that. Like, it's very interesting the way that game's played. But again, when something's that interesting, it is also not beginner friendly. So again, 5 out of 10. Now, that is going to be second edition. The PDF of second edition is available to people that backed it back in, I think, December, which is cool, but it's not available to the regular populace yet, so technically it's still first edition out there. Second edition is going to include something called Huntsman Chronicle. When that is out, buy that freaking game, because Changeling is really cool. Hunter the Vigil. Second edition was just announced, which is really cool, but it's a reimagining. I don't even want to say it's a reimagining. What I find really interesting about Hunter the Vigil is they have these groups called compacts and conspiracies, and if you look at all these different groups of compacts and conspiracies, you can see where almost each one of them fits in among the old supplement books for the classic World of Darkness. They just compile a shitload of different types of monster hunters and toss them in a book. Except for, really, they kind of ignore anything that's like Hunter the Reckoning. And that's up for debate whether that's a good or a bad thing. I was very partial to Hunter the Reckoning, but I also used to play in a lot of action-oriented games when I was younger. So again, debatable. Hunter the Vigil. You're hunters. You're things that hunt the things that go above in the night. And there's all sorts of different types. You got I'm actually going to move this around and say what it's like first and then kind of explain why. It's like Supernatural, John Carpenter's Vampires, Men in Black. And that's because you have all of those different types of hunters in here. The Union could easily represent dudes that just drive around hunting down shit, like Supernatural. John Carpenter's Vampires, you have like 3 different Christian-ish types of hunters that could work for churches or work for the government but have the church's interest in mind. Some of them have a little bit of supernatural abilities, kind of like True Faith used to be. You got the Men in Black, where you've got Task Force Valkyrie, which is legit just a group of government dudes that go and hunt down what they can. And they've got all sorts of fun stuff that they have access to, as far as even biomechanical human engineering items that you can get using merit dot. It's very cool. Very cool. Big fan of it. User-friendly, I'm going to say 7 out of 10. Because really, if you boil it down, the template that you added to the game and the way you build it is really no different for the most part, than making a mortal character. It's more their background stories, aside from the fact that there are a couple that get the special skill sets. But again, as far as user-friendly goes, 7 out of 10, it's pretty basic. It's really on the storyteller as to how complicated it gets. So, again, that's where that is. Next, Geist the Sin Eaters. Second edition coming out, and the very useful thing for this is the manuscript is available for backers. I've actually got a binder of all the manuscript stuff printed out, so it's almost like having a prototype version of the book. I am, again, very huge on Geist. Very big fan. But first edition was, pardon the term, I guess. First edition was a shit show. It was, I apologize for the numbing. It's just, they had so many good ideas for it, but they didn't execute in a way that was cohesive. I really hope that's not shown on the microphone. In a way that's cohesive and clear to understand. It's a mess. But the concept is awesome. So you're someone, you screwed up, something happened, you dead. You died. And on the urge of going from here to there, wherever you're supposed to be, this thing crawls its way out of the depths of, I guess it would most likely be from the underworld itself. And it's like, hey, I want something. You can help me. I can help you. Do you want to go back? And it's like, but if you go back, you're taking me with you. Like, we're partners. We're one. And obviously, as you're playing one of these characters, the Sin Eater, you agree. You're like, yep, let's go. Let's fucking back shit. Let's get back up there. And it doesn't... The interesting thing I need to, again, mention between first edition and second edition is, in first edition, it's like, it doesn't heal you or bring you back to life. It just pushes death away long enough for you to heal from whatever it did to damage. They won't bother trying to make a deal with someone who can't come back in some capacity. I mean, that's just detrimental. But in the first edition, it was like they pushed back death to the point where you healed and you're alive again, and you're technically more alive than anybody. Blah 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 blah. Second edition, they're like, no. You died and you came back part ghost. You're dead for all important stat things. Because I mean, it's important for certain other games if they're going to be mixed up to understand that difference, that you are seen as being dead even though you are not. And you're, again, kind of like the way werewolves are the police between the spirit world and here, Now you're I'm going to change it though. While you're not a police officer typically, you're more like an ambassador between the land of the dead and the living. And there's different layers to the land of the dead. You've got Twilight, which is kind of like almost a realm, if you will, that's superimposed over ours, where ghosts that have anchors here, things that are keeping them from passing on anywhere, that's where they live. You know, those transparent things that you see, you know, out of the corner of your eye, or the whispering in your ear when you go to sleep, or the cupboards that open. That's something, a spirit, a ghost, I refer to them as shades, or trapped in Twilight, the realm superimposing ours, that it's the land of the dead, really. But then you have the underworld, which is a whole other experience, and that is the true land of the dead. While Twilight is still, you know, the land of the quick with a superimposed realm on top of it, the land of the dead is the underworld, and that's where that's what happens when you don't have anything keeping you in Twilight, but you can't move on either. That's where you don't want to be. Now, there's entire cultures and societies, with second edition at least, really, in the underworld. In first edition, it kind of made ghosts seem like they were just mindless echoes. They weren't really even people anymore. They were just what was left behind that couldn't move on. In second edition, they've even made ghost player characters, which is cool. And they've added all sorts of new types of enemies and depth to it and plot. And most importantly, they simplified your powers, your abilities, your skills. They made that far more clear as to what you could do and how you could do it. But when we're talking about the way they did things initially, they had the way these haunts, these keys, and all this stuff, the way it worked was just, you couldn't understand it, and they didn't care to explain it clearly. So it was very brutal. So the second edition announced, what it's like is, again, to compare it to something, is like the Frighteners, which I frigging love. And it's also even like the Sixth Sense, where the kid could see them. The only difference is that kid would also be bonded to a ghost, which would be a good time. But considering second edition is not out yet, and the manuscript is only available to backers, and it's also a kind of a prototype of the new systems, I gotta go for user-friendly, even though this is one of my favorite games, period, of 2 out of 10. Because I have to go by the first edition. They're a convoluted nightmare, and while the setting is near perfect, that kicks it right in the balls. If you've got the manuscript, it goes up to 7 or 8 out of 10. Way more clarified, way more easy to use. The settings are way better, and it's something to anxiously wait for. But again, right now, that's not available. The manuscript's not available to everybody. So we're saying 2 out of 10 for first edition Geist. Now we're moving on to Mummy the Curse, the reimagining, if you will, of Mummy the Resurrection. Now, just to be clear, too, to go back on that, Geist is kind of like, it was their version of Wraith from Classic World of Darkness, mixed up with Mortals. But regardless, it was just a mess. But with second edition, if you're familiar, the underworld now is pretty much turned into Stygia, with different ideas behind it. So, full disclosure about Mummy, though. First off, they've announced second edition. And with second editions, in case you haven't noticed yet, they do a much better job explaining everything. They really, with their second editions, just usually knock it out of the park. I haven't seen a second edition book I really haven't complained about, whereas the first editions, I've gotten it, you know, I've got bones I can pick. So, with Mummy, what's the setting? Ancient, powerful, senile. You'll play as a mummy. You're an ancient cursed being, and you've woken up with tons of friggin' power, but it is slipping away. What will you do with the time you have before you enter slumber again? It's very interesting because you start. It's in reverse. You normally start off as weak characters. In this one, you are a titan, but you don't. It's almost aimless unless you have a cult that was worshiping you that kind of points you in a direction, or it's kind of like Promethean as far as I'm concerned. Now, full disclosure again, I'm not completely well-versed on Mummy yet. While I have the book, I'm still busy digesting all of the books. Like, I'm not fully there yet. I really came back fully came back to tabletopping back in January is where I really came back into it with a fervor, with a huge obsession. Up until, I used to spend literally every day, every night playing up until, we'll say, 2006, where I met my wife. And life stepped in and things got all sorts of knocked around. But so I'm still in the process of digesting some of the books. But with Mummy, it's just very bizarre, and I think kind of like Promethean First Edition, it may be better suited for a one-on-one player experience. It definitely not for a zoo game. Again, storytellers can do whatever you want, and there's ways to make things work. Like maybe, for example, your other players find the mummy, and the mummy's, kind of unhinged with power, and they were like, hey, we'll help you if you help us. And then you've got a situation where you could make it work, kind of. It would be very, very odd, like the Odd Couple. But what it's like Memento and the Mummy. Obviously, pretty clear. User-friendly, 6, from what I picked up on it, what I read, 6 out of 10. It did not seem, as far as a rule set go, it did not seem grossly complicated. It did not seem to be a huge mess. It seemed fairly clear, but as a player, it's just a weird place for any player to start that is not experienced in the Chronicles of Darkness, or role-playing in general. It's just kind of a weird place to be. So moving on. You heard me earlier mention the God Machine Chronicle that's now included in the Chronicles of Darkness core book. Well, the God Machine is almost like this Lovecraftian nightmare that exists within our reality. Now, for the record, it's not God. I mean, unless you want it to be as you're doing things. It's not God. But it's almost like a god. But it's almost like a parasite, too. That it just came into our world, and it has some sort of agenda that we cannot fathom. And if you try to make it a fathomable agenda, you're doing a disservice to yourself and to your players. You just are. Because part of the charm is just having this alien thing influencing all this crap behind the scenes. And you don't even know if it may not be an antagonist, really. It may even have humanity in its best interest. But maybe it's like the Matrix, where it needs mortals to feed. Or it could be any number of things. But long story short, mystery is horror. And this is a game shrouded in mystery. Now, Demon the Descent pulls back a little bit of that. It kind of opens up a little bit of things. So for the God Machine to work its agenda, it has these agents that are, kind of referred to as angels. And it sends these things off, it constructs them, and it sends them off to do their job. And then when they do their job, they come back, the God Machine dismantles them, recycles them, puts it in all sorts of different angels, and repeat. So that's all perfect until it's not. Out of nowhere, maybe he said for you to go kill a baby, or like literally just destroy an entire hospital. And you for just even a millisecond, just for a moment, you go, why? That's all it takes. You're disconnected. You plummet. You drop. You slam back down. And now you are no longer connected to the God Machine in the same way. And obviously the God Machine's like, hey, guys, angels, go bring that back for recycling. It's trash, but we can use the pieces. Now, in order for those angels to work their agendas for the God Machine, they have a lot of fake identities that they have sewn into reality. People that may not have even existed at all, but they found a way to insert them. And they're called covers. And you start off with at least one of those. At least. You can have more. You can buy them under the merits and the background stuff. But it's tricky. Here's the real trickiness of this. So your powers, the actual powers of this game, aren't that poorly set up. But it's the playing of these characters that things can get kind of tricky. It's just not again, this is a guide for beginners. You're not playing one character depending on your covers. You're playing at least two to begin with, really. You're playing your demon, they're called demons, and your first cover. And you want to make deals with humans and make agreements. And then when they, when terms are met, you get to take you don't take their soul, but you take them. You get to hop in that body, and that's all you, baby. Like, there's all sorts. It's kind of like Changeling in that respect. Contracts. You make deals with demons. That's one of the ways you get more covers. So the real difficulty here isn't the mechanics. It's the fact that as a new player or storyteller to the Chronicles of Darkness, are you prepared to play 5 or, anywhere between 2 to 6 different personalities? And as a storyteller, are you prepared to have a group of people playing that all have different personalities like that? So that's where it gets tricky. So, what it's like is like the Matrix, the Bourne films, Burn Notice. It's a game of techno-gnostic espionage, I think is the term. Yeah, techno-gnostic espionage. Technostic. It's a really cool concept. Think of it this way, though. You're a spy that got burned. Except for having just the regular FBI, it's a friggin' god tracking you down. Now, however, as far as being user-friendly, 4 out of 10. It's not that it's insanely complicated or the mechanics, but with all the different faces you hop from and swapping the personas, it's just not easy for a new player to do. It's even harder for a new storyteller to deal with it. And that's a reimagining of Demon the Fallen from the classic World of Darkness. Now we have the first out of the all-new core games that came from the Chronicles of Darkness. And bear with me here. It's Beast the Primordial. Okay? Actually, no, I'm sorry. It's the second. It's the second one. Promethean's the first, first fully original game. Which is, again, I feel like they knocked it out of the park, but it's just different. Yeah, but it's cool. It's good. I like it. It fits. But now we're on Beast. And originally, from what I heard, this was really crowdfunded while I was out of the game. And I picked up I picked it up because I'm one of those people, I need to have the entire set, because especially if I have someone that might play them. And man, this is the first core game that Onyx Path did that just, I'd say in my opinion, but if you were to Google it and look online and check it out, it's just not good. It's not clear. It's not obvious what it's trying to be, and that's a problem. So, it just isn't what it was supposed to be. I mean, originally you were nightmare creatures that devoured people, from what I gathered. Originally, what goes around with the Kickstarter originally, it was you were monsters that had something in you called a beast. After another beast ate your soul, you become a beast. And you have these realms that you can pull people in through their dreams, and pretty much fucking eat them. Like, that's pretty much what I heard what Beast was supposed to be. And to me, that sounds, it's not the most deep game. It's not the most meaningful game, but it sure sounds like it could have been a hell of a lot of fun. And especially where you play a zoo game where you could have one of these as an antagonist. I mean, they're pretty much Freddy Krueger, really. That's the way I see it. That's really cool. But then they changed it, and now your goal is to scare the shit out of people until they learn lessons in the dream world. Like, you're trying to help humanity by scaring the shit out of them. You're no longer trying to eat these people or anything like that. I guess you eat their fear or something. Again, I need to double check on the mechanics of the system, because I just can't trudge through it. Because even, chapter by chapter, paragraph by paragraph, when you read the book, it's fighting itself. It doesn't know what the hell it is. And your enemies are called heroes. Just to make things clear, that you're something called a beast, and your enemies are called heroes, but your goal is to teach them lessons, and heroes are the bad guys of the game. So even the terminology is ass backwards. So, I'll tell you the truth, I really hope it gets a second edition, so it can find its direction and go where it's supposed to be. But it's just... yeah, it's not good, not clear, not cohesive. And that's not even talking about the mechanics. The mechanics also, you have realms that you build. I don't know. It's like Boss Monster, the role-playing game, but if it wasn't fun at all. And it was just trying to... I don't know. It just hurts. And if you read it, I was listening, I think it was the Darker Days podcast, possibly, and they were even saying that it was very much almost like the writers were trying to live out their own fantasies for when they were bullied. It's just, I don't know. And if you read, they had, in the back of the book, they have examples of heroes, and you're reading up on them, and you're like, holy shit, these aren't bad people. These are who I want to play. Why do I want to play this monster that's quote-unquote trying to help people, but trying to scare the hell out of them in their dreams to teach them? Okay, anyway, before I get fully off track here. So it's like the Nightmare on Elm Street remake, other disappointing things, maybe Jacob's Ladder to an extent, I guess. As far as user-friendly, 2 out of 10. Incomplete, and if the game doesn't know what it is, how the hell are you supposed to? Like, at some point I may use one as an antagonist for my game, but I would still be changing almost the entire idea of what they're trying to do. Alright, so that's the cores. The one mention I'll say that's not even out yet that they've been working on that's going to hit crowdfunding soon is Deviants, the Renegades, which is pretty much something or someone experimented on you. You got away. They're trying to hunt you down, and you're trying to rebel against them. From what I can tell, it's kind of like a whole troop out of... I'm sure by now most people listening to this have seen Stranger Things. So it's like kind of like you're playing 11 and that there's other people that were experimented on like her, I guess, off the top of my head. So that, I can't cover it. I don't know anything about it yet aside from that very basic snippet. So with the releases, based on releases available, again, the really impressive thing is, for the most part, it's almost in the order they were released. Almost. You got, first off, this is my recommendation as far as what books to start with and where to go. The Chronicles of Darkness core rulebook. Kind of goes without saying. It's got the most stuff, most bang for your buck, and almost all the other games. You can add something to almost all the other games using it. And you do need, no, you really don't. Okay, so, number 1, the Chronicles of Darkness core rulebook. Number 2, Vampire the Requiem 2nd edition. Number 3, Werewolf the Forsaken 2nd edition. 4, Hunter the Vigil. 5, Changing the Dreaming. If you're someone that did Kickstart it and you've got 2nd edition available, by all means, for the love of God, go with that. Promethean the Created 2nd edition. Mummy the Curse. Mage the Awakening. Demon the Descent. Geist the Sin Eaters, unless you have access to the manuscript, then it's 5th. And Beast the Primordial. So, again, and kind of, I'll be honest with you, because I didn't put it on here very clearly. I would put Changeling, again, I need to make sure that I'm very clear that that is 2nd. Oh, I put Changeling the Dreaming on here, so that is very wrong. Changeling the Lost would be number 5, while Promethean the Created would be number 6. So, again, Chronicles of Darkness, Vampire, Werewolf, Hunter, Changeling, Promethean, Mummy, and the last 4, which is where it gets kind of dicey, is Mage, Demon, Geist, and Beast. So I really hope this helps. Again, the transcript is up here. My name is Chris. I'm with the Botch Pit. I really hope this was useful. If you have any questions, comments, anything like that, drop us an email, go on the transcript, drop us a comment. You can find us on Facebook under the Botch Pit. Can't miss us. We love to hear from you. Thanks for taking your time. Have a good one. Stay spooky.